I'm reading currently this fabulous book called Call of the Reed Warbler by Charles Massey. And it's an Australian non-fiction, as much as I love fiction in all its forms. I'm increasingly reading non-fiction stuff. And this is about sustainable agriculture, in particular regenerating land and a rethink of how land can be used more sustainably and beautiful holistic practices for healthy food and healthy earth and healthy planet. And there's a great book in the library. This isn't in the library, I wouldn't imagine, but there's a book called Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe that every Australian should read in a similar vein, a natural history book. And another one called The Biggest Estate on Earth by an Australian historian called Bill Gamage. He's also done some World War I histories and different things, but that's also about Australian land use, in particular Aboriginal Australian land use, and the beautiful landscape that was here until 1788. So that's what I'm reading, called The Reed Warbler by Charles Massey.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Hope, and I have recently finished reading this book, which is called People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks. Geraldine Brooks is actually an Australian who is living in USA, and this book is about a book conservator called Hannah, who's actually Australian as well, and she lives in Sydney, and she has to restore and conserve books. Her latest job is to restore the Sarajevo Haggadah, which is a Jewish prayer book, and it has been found, and she goes through the book, and it's really interesting, the descriptions of what she has to do to try to conserve this book. And interspersed in between her story or her journey of restoring this book are historical flashbacks to the journey of the book. So we go with the book to, the different places where it was. And I found this book really fascinating. It's very, very well written. If you've read anything of Geraldine Brooks before, she's a really, really great author. She used to be a journalist. And her descriptions are just really good, really evocative. And she even goes through some of the different particles and parts of objects that are found in the book and sort of traces how they got into the book and how the book survived. It's a really fascinating read. I'd recommend it.
Hi, I'm Kelly, and I am currently reading, or I've just started reading, I Like to Watch by Emily Nussbaum. Possibly, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name. It's a bit different to what I like to read. Normally I tend to read books that involve long, arduous journeys and dry cheese and mead for breakfast, maybe a dragon, like highbrow literary canonical stuff. But this is a collection of essays. The subtitle is Arguing My Way Through the TV Revolution. So she combines essays and her love of TV, which really speaks to my soul, and she covers everything. So it's really current, like it was actually just published this year or late last year, but she starts with the chapter How Buffy the Vampire Slayer Turned Me into a TV Critic, and how basically Buffy the Vampire Slayer was like this first popular culture TV show that actually really changed the way she watched TV and changed the way we watched TV. And then she goes on to talk about The Sopranos, and she moves in and talks about how Sex and the City lost its good name, and then talks about Jessica Jones and all sorts of really fascinating TV shows that we all love, Breaking Bad and Zombies and The Walking Dead, and so it's actually a really interesting take on TV and popular culture and the issues that surround all of it. It's actually really interesting. So that's what I'm currently reading right now.
Hello, my name's Mrs. Lang. I'm in the EALD faculty at Orara this year. The book that I am reading is Boy Swallows Universe by Trent Dalton. I picked this up last school holidays thinking that I would get through it, but I still haven't finished it yet. I'll start again next holidays. but I had heard lots of wonderful things about this book from people. Trent Dalton is a journalist at the Australian newspaper, and he's a very talented writer, and this is a really fabulous story about a young boy called Eli who grows up in really sort of low socio-economic circumstances, but he's a very bright kid, but he's surrounded by challenges and but really interesting characters as well. What I really, really love about this book is the language. Trent Dalton is a fabulous writer, and his description is just beautiful. So this is what I'm reading.
Hi, I'm Steve Caesar, or Mr. Caesar. Is this a Orara thing? Or?
It's an Orara
That's
thing.
Mr. Caesar. And I've just finished reading Moby Dick. I've tried to read this a couple times over the last 10 years, even 20 years or so, and I've gotten probably 100 pages in and go, oh, it's too exhausting, it's too heavy. It is really dense. It's like, listen to this. It's heavy. It's, at one point, you keep on stopping and going back. At one point, it's going, what's going on here? Because there's a one long sentence, and that keeps on happening. And this sentence went for half a page. So we're talking a sentence that's got 500 words in it. So it was a struggle. Having said that, the writing is spectacular. Once you sit down and actually get in the rhythm of it, these images of the ocean and the way that Melville describes them and goes from like these Stygian landscapes with vapor and steam rolling through to this beautiful morning of skin of leg beaters gold, or these wonderful isolated pools, but there's always this sense of menace and threat that he maintains through the book. What's he call it? The heartless immensity, and you get a real feeling for that. It's absolutely astounding. Now, the structure took me a little while to get into as well, so there's a lot of things you have to jump the hurdles over. You see why it's a real essential book to read before you go more to coil, because the narrator is Ishmael. Call me Ishmael is the first words of the book, so you think, oh, it's all through Ishmael's perspective, but then he sort of dissolves and becomes this textbook about whale hunting and the whale in history and in prose and poetry and the Bible. A ton of Jonah references as you get. It's very detailed. You get a really good insight of this huge industry before basically fossil fuels came along, and so you could say that fossil fuels were kind of a blessing for whales. Anyway, that's a paradox. Ishmael comes back towards the end, and this beautiful prose comes through, and it's like really dark and it's really menacing. It's very, very Shakespearean. How Ahab gets his blacksmith to wrought a harpoon out of horse nails because they're the hardest, and then he gets all the harpooners to slit the wrists, and he forges this harpoon in their blood and says, I dedicate not to God but to the devil himself. It's like really crazy stuff. I wasn't expecting that at all. But I highly recommend, if you've got the tenacity, but like you've really got to push through this because it's a heavily wrought. The language is really thick, and if you can go with the little tangents in the narration and structure, because I found myself just constantly after 80 pages of hearing about the comparison of whale industries from the French to the British to the American. I was going, oh my God, get on with it. But then you're back in the ocean and you can smell the salt and you hear the wind cracking in the sails. It's absolutely astounding, the imagery in this book. So I highly recommend it, and check it out.
Hello everyone, it's Mr. Wilson here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a book I've started to read called The Trauma Cleaner. Now, it's not a book that I personally went out and bought. It was a gift for Christmas from a friend of mine, and it's actually quite a fascinating biography, which is highly recommended, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list. So just a very quick introduction to the book. It is about a trans woman and her extraordinary life in death, decay and disaster. Now, she basically attends crime scenes, murder scenes, suicide scenes, the cleaning up of horrendous things left by people who have had tragic accidents after the police have left, and it's somebody's job to do that. It's really quite fascinating. Now, if you like a bit of non-fiction and a very, very interesting character indeed, and a woman whose life has been quite extraordinary, check out The Trauma Cleaner.
I've chosen a young adult novel today as I work in the library and I'm keen on promoting young adult fiction. Words in Deep Blue by Cass Crowley. And I'll use that horrible expression, it ticks a lot of boxes for me. She's Australian, it's set in Australia, she's involved in children's lit in Australia. This particular book is about a relationship between a boy and a girl. It's about the loss of a brother. It's about a bookshop. Doesn't get much better than a bookshop. It's a special write because in writing this book she references a whole lot of other authors and books, all of which are worth chasing up, and this book makes you want to find out about those books. It's a lovely story. It has everything. It has some sadness and it has some tragedy, but it has lots of love and happiness as well. I hope I've made you want to read it today. You need to read it to find out what words in Deep Blue mean.